What's up, guys? So today we're going to be analyzing a single raised pot scenario with the cutoff open raise versus a big blind flat on a king 7-6 two-tone board. Now, one thing to note is that this is definitely not a board where the cutoff is going to be c-betting his entire range into the big blind. There are going to be many components of the ranges that are equalized, which means that the cutoff has to use a selective c-bet strategy. Of course, with the option to choose multiple bet sizes, the solver will be employing a mixed strategy and the EV of many lines will be the same. So this is the cutoff range. This is the big blind range. So the big blind is not going to have some of the higher suited connectors. It's not going to have ace jack, king jack, queen jack, the higher pocket pairs. It's also not going to have ace 5 suited and ace 4 suited. Those hands make pretty good 3-bets pre-flop. Let's go ahead and look at the equity distributions. So in case you forgot how to read an equity distribution, it's pretty simple. So if we want to select a group of hands with a certain amount of equity, in this case 80% or above, we can mouse over and see that 7.03 of the big blind's range has 80% or more equity, and see that 11% has 80% or more equity. 11% of the range. So this is the percentage of range, and this is the equity. So pretty simple. So we'll start by looking at the proportion of strong hands in each player's range. So that'll be hands with 75% or more equity. And you can see that the cutoff has a slight nut advantage. Now, this is not a dramatic nut advantage. And if you look on boards where the cutoff c-bets his entire range versus the big blind, usually the nut advantage is going to be much greater. So in terms of this scenario, we see about a 6% overall nut advantage, or 6% more of the hands in the cutoff's range are strong than the hands in the big blind's range. Now let's take a look at good and medium strength hands. So those are hands with a 50% equity range to a 75% equity. And we can see that the proportion of hands in the strength category for both players are relatively equal. Of course, the medium strength hands in the cutoff are slightly stronger than the medium strength hands in the big blind. And finally, let's look at the weak and trash hands. And this is about as equal as ranges can really get. There's no portion of the big blind's range in this case that's just dramatically weaker than the cutoff's range. So this is really a case where ranges are somewhat equalized, or as equalized as they can really get with a pre-flop caller versus a pre-flop raiser. So what this means is that you're going to want to implement a polarized c-bet strategy. In this case, it's pretty simple to see that you'd want to be aggressive with these strong hands with 75% or more equity. You'd want to c-bet hands with maybe a 30 to 50% equity category. Those are usually the hands that have the ability to improve. Then you can check with hands that have 30% or less equity. And you can also check with these medium strength hands, and that's generally convenient because then if the big blind decides to probe the turn, you can comfortably call with your medium strength hands. So yeah, that is the main idea behind the betting strategies with these sorts of equity distributions. So now we'll get into the particulars of actually building our ranges. So let's go ahead and build this c-bet range. To start off with, let's take a look at our flush draws. So ace, deuces through 5. Those are on the weaker end of our flush draws, the flush draws with less showdown value. So I like to bet actual flush draws as well as the backdoor flush draws. So ace 6 and ace 7 are both pretty much the highest middle pairs that you can have. And they definitely benefit from protection. Additionally, if an ace comes, you do make a 2-pair. So I think that it's reasonable to bet these. Now, with ace 6, you're probably going to be checking a little bit more. So I would say that maybe you could check a6 like 50% of the time and then bet a7 all the time. So kind of a mixed strategy for a6 and a7. For the flush draws, I would bet the flush draw with the spades. And because there's an 8, it sort of has some degree of draw potential. So I think you can include the diamonds in there as well. And then the other suits, I would just check. Ace queen suited just doesn't have any stable equity. Additionally, so let's say you have ace queen of spades. If another spade comes on the board, now your opponent can't have ace of spades in his hand, can't have the queen of spades in his hand, which means that the flush draw, the ace high flush draw is removed, the queen high flush draw is removed, which he could call down with. Adding these very strong flush draws into your checking range allows you to show up on later streets with very strong hands and to get value later on. Because if you think about it, very rarely is the big blind going to be calling triple barrels particularly wide. So checking the flop, especially when you have a hand that isn't necessarily that threatened, and there are a lot of cards that can come out that make your hand easier to play, not much of a point to just betting all your draws. So I think it is good to mix in some checks with both some hands that have reasonably good showdown value. Ace high always has some showdown value, as well as some ability to make a top pair and some ability to make flushes. So just kind of having a general group of that. So I think ace 10 suited, because it's kind of on the higher end of your holdings with an ace in them. Now with a top pair, top kicker on ace king suited, I would say that a mixed strategy probably works best. So I would just do 50-50. So when you have ace king, top pair, top kicker, you block his calling range to a certain degree, especially when you have top pair, top kicker with a flush draw. So having kind of a 50-50 mixed strategy, I think, is a good way to go. And there are a lot of boards where with these sorts of hands, it's just 50-50. And now with ace king offsuit, let's see. So I'm going to go and select some suits. So definitely with a diamond or spade. The diamond or spade, I might bet. And then with no diamond and no spade, I think that's reasonable. You definitely might want to check with holdings that have a spade in them too, but like you can't necessarily just drill down into endless levels of precision. I would bet pocket kings, which is a three of a kind. I would bet that 100% of the time. The reason I do that is because there are a lot of draws that the big blind can call with. So you're not doing yourself any favors by slow playing trips on a volatile board. Additionally, pocket sixes, pocket sevens, you can bet. And 5-4 suited, which has both a 8-out straight draw as well as a flush draw some of the time. So definitely a hand that it's fair game to bet. Bottom pair with a runner straight draw. I think I'd bet, or I'd check the clubs and the hearts. Definitely bet with the spades. Now, for 7-6 suited, what I would do is, let's see, so you have a 2 pair. You're blocking all of his middle and bottom pairs. Additionally, you're blocking some of the hands where he might have draws that he would raise or call with. So I think something like 75% of the time. Check the rest. 8-9 suited. I would just bet 8-9 suited all the time. One of the more premium holdings. With 8-7 suited, bet like 25% of the time. Just like that. Okay, now with pocket eights, I would just check it. With pocket nines, I would check it. Pocket tens, I would check. Pocket jacks, I would check. Pocket queens, I would check. Deuces through fives, I would check. Now ace 9 offsuit. So you have the 9, which is useful to blocking some of the draws that the big blind will defend with. And you have an ace, which is useful for blocking hands like ace king. I would say that you can definitely bet this, especially with hands that block his flush draws and his combo draws. Yeah, I do something like that. Ace 10 offsuit. I don't really see a reason to bet ace 10 offsuit, so I'd check it. Ace jack offsuit, I'd also check. Ace queen offsuit, I would check. Pocket aces, I would bet pretty much all the time. Or king queen offsuit, it's one of the stronger top pairs in a range. So I would bet all of our king of spade combos and then check the rest. Now for king jack offsuit, I would just bet that like 75% of the time or 50% of the time. We can check it. King 10 offsuit, I would just check. Queen 10 offsuit, yeah, I would check. Now, jack 10 offsuit, also a reasonable check. Now, queen jack offsuit, I do like a 50-50 strategy because it does have some runner straight potential, but I mean, you definitely don't want to be betting it all the time, but I think betting it some of the time as a bluff works pretty well. Now, with these lower top pairs, I think are kind of medium strength hands, with which obviously king 6 suited is a very strong hand, so we can bet that. King 7 suited is a very strong hand. It's a 2 pair, so we can bet that. Then king 8, king 9, I would check. Then king 10 suited with spades is a clear bet for me. And then I would check the hearts and the clubs. Now, king jack suited, I would think it's reasonable to bet all the time. And then king queen suited, I would bet more or less all the time. Ace 9 suited, I would check. And let's see what the c-bet frequency is looking like so far. So it's 25%. So queen 7 suited, I think we can bet like diamonds, but then check the rest. Then queen 8 suited works well as a weaker flush draw. Queen 9 suited, you can bet your flush draws, check the non-flush draws. Queen 10 suited, so yeah, bet your flush draws. Okay, and then queen jack suited, I would bet the diamond combo, check the spades, check everything else. Wouldn't bet it too often. So 9-7 suited, reasonable check. 10-9 suited, I think you can bet your flush draw combos. Then 10-8 suited. Then finally jack 8 suited, jack 9 suited. Again, I just bet the draws, check everything else. And then jack 10 suited, I would again do the exact same thing, because we are checking back some very strong flush draws. So it's perfectly reasonable to bet some of these weaker flush draws and weaker straight draws all the time, because the range ends up being reasonably balanced. Okay, so there's our complete range. So now we're going to take a look at the range we built and then compare it to the solver. Okay, so let's see how we did. So these lower end flush draws, the solver's betting at a pretty similar frequency. Ace 7 suited, we chose to bet all the time. Obviously the solver will mix in some checking, but I think that it's close enough that simplifying it isn't a massive EV loss. Ace 8 suited, they're betting it a little bit more, but again, it's hard to be infinitely precise. Ace 9 suited, we chose to check all the time. The solver's betting it some of the time. Ace 10 suited, ace jack suited, and ace queen suited, we were pretty close. Now, ace king suited, we're almost exactly correct. Ace king offsuit, almost exactly correct. Aces, some slight error, but again, you're not losing that much EV by betting it all the time. So betting all of the trips and the pocket 7s and the pocket 6s is pretty correct. And then betting these lower pocket pairs, I chose to check them all the time, and the solver is betting pocket 4s, pocket 3s, and pocket 2s. That's interesting to me for sure. I see the solver doing this quite often, is betting the very low pocket pairs that have some equity, but they definitely don't have much redraw potential. So it's definitely quite interesting. Now, 5-4 suited, we were pretty close. 6-5 suited, 7-6 suited, a lot of these low suited connectors, 10-8 suited, 10-9 suited, these lower end flush draws. King 4 suited, king 5 suited, we simplified to only checking. The solver's doing a mixed strategy of betting some of the time. King 6 and king 7 suited, we're betting those a little bit more than the solver. That's fine in my opinion. King 8, king 9, and king 10 suited, we're pretty close. King jack suited, king queen suited, all these higher pocket pairs are medium strength hands, our trips. Ace 9 suited, we were spot on. So yeah, that is building a range, and I think that we did pretty well. It's one thing to know the strategy, but I think the more of these ranges that you build, the better you get at executing in game time, because you can visualize your range, you can understand which piece of the puzzle each hand fits within, and you can make good decisions. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a good day.